was your first shirtless interview?
Yeah, I've done some sweaty interviews before I got the air conditioner. I thought Andy Richter was going to die in my garage, but I've since cooled things down in there.
I was thinking earlier because you were in New York for a while. You were in Astoria, right?
Yeah, I lived in the city for a few years, and in Astoria for many years. Yeah.
I was thinking that, like, if I ever moved back to the West Coast and wanted to convince myself this was not a place that I wanted to move back to, I would come on a week like this.
The funny thing is like this is the best week I've had in New York in a long time because there's something very like I remember this heat, and I remember that the weird sort of like almost like euphoria of exhaustion and dampness you get. I like walking around the streets of New York in the humidity because I think everybody just looks slightly cranky. They all look like they're walking away from some shameful sexual adventure. Everyone looks like they're on a walk of shame when it's humid in New York because their clothes just give up immediately, their hair gives up immediately, they're just like ugh. And I think it's really charming. And I have a lot of memories about summer in New York, just like running around drunk and crazy and sweating and doing comedy. It was a fun time. I have more memories of this time. It seems to jar some kind of I'm kind of sort of nostalgic for New York more when it's this muggy and horrible than I do when it's beautiful and crisp.
So do you miss almost that like forced interaction that New York gives you? I mean, you're in Los Angeles now, so you can cut yourself off from human beings most of the day.
I think I do. I think it's very energizing, but I don't miss it actively. I'm never in LA going, like, God, I got to get back to New York. I mean, I hit a wall with it. There's a point where you're like, there's a guy right there always, and I don't know him, and it's like starting to bother me, but with this time, like it's been a while since I've been back alone for any real amount of time. It's been pretty good because I mean I know the city. I'm very comfortable here, and I do like walking around and looking at the parade of there's nothing like just the fact that on any given day on any block in New York you can just see every level of person doing whatever it is they do here. There's just it's just pretty amazing. You don't see that anywhere else. Are people working.
Are you? I mean, you bought a house. Are you just in LA now? Is that the plan for?
Yeah. I'm perfectly comfortable out there. I mean, I like my little house, and I don't mind driving. I grew up driving. Really, the downside of LA is a sort of you're a little cut off, but I mean, you kind of build your own life for yourself. Mm-hmm. There are some benefits to having room to cook in your kitchen, which is certainly a rare thing in New York. There are some advantages to wanting to go back to your house, or being able to. Like in New York, I just remember you'd leave in the morning and then like you just didn't go home, for maybe for an hour, to shower and then go back out. But I have a life where I don't mind sitting in my house.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a job where you could.
Yeah, it's
pretty.
It's
a
short work. It's a short walk to work for me.
Yeah,
I just go out back and into the garage.
Yeah,
but no, the only problem with LA is just it's sort of hackneyed, but it really is traffic. I mean, that is really the most consistent pain in the ass of living in that city. But other than that, it's pretty nice.
Did you move out there like with hopes of doing TV at some point, or what brought you out there?
No, I think that was definitely why I went out there originally. I was with a woman and she was ready to go, and I was done. Because every place becomes a small town eventually. And I went out there. I had a deal with Fox Studios, to develop, and the woman who became my second wife, she was ready to go. She was pretty jarred, by 9/11, and that kind of fucked her head up pretty good, and I was just sort of like I had sort of run the gamut here. Everything becomes a small neighborhood. Did I already say that? So
it's worth saying twice.
Well, it is kind of because even when you live in New York, you sit there and think about like it's amazing they have everything here. How much of everything do you do? Well, I go to that bodega, and I hang out at that place. That's where I eat. So, you're really relegated to a few blocks that you're comfortable
And like in
with.
LA, at least you've got an excuse not to go there, right? Because you've got 3 hours of traffic separating you from...
Yeah, and it's like building a home. It's very hard to build a home in New York unless you have a lot of money. But I did go out there, I had a deal with Fox Studios to write a script for a show. That didn't happen, but it did get me out there. And, and then after that went south, I had some money stashed, and I'd never really thought about buying a house. I didn't know how to buy a house. But, when you're with a woman who wants a house, you learn things. So, I found a house, and, it's just a coincidence, how it all happened. But, yeah, I end up with a house. I'm a comic. Like, I don't spend much money, and when I have it, I just keep it because I don't know when shit is going to go bad. So I was out there, since 2002, and that deal went south, and I don't really remember what I did. I ended up back here. Oh yeah, I do. So I was out there 2002. The deal didn't happen. I bought the house, and then I got the job on Air America. So then I was going back and forth, not much, but mostly here in New York. So I came back to New York for another year and a half to do Air America, to do morning radio, and apparently destroy my marriage in the course of that. And then, I went back to L.A. and tried to do some radio there, but that didn't really pan out. And then, then the wife left, and then it got ugly, and I went pretty bankrupt. And then I came back here to do, the other thing that led to the podcast, the Break Room Live, the live video streaming show at Cedar. And that eventually, Air America went belly up again, and that's what led to the podcast. And then I'm back. And now, I'm on TV now. Like, it wasn't until the podcast that, things, when you're a comic, like every few years, you hope enough shit goes wrong or changes in your life that you can pitch a show that's different than the one you pitched a few years ago. As a comic, you do get opportunities to go into executives' office and put on a show for them so they can fill up their calendar. What
were you pitching last time?
Which time?
The
one that led to this show?
When you moved out to Los Angeles. Well, I mean, obviously, this show.
What, the one? What, the Fox show?
Yeah.
Oh, that was which one was that? Oh, that was a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first deal I had was before that. The first deal I was in New York, and the first deal I had was with NBC, and I was a disgruntled chef who couldn't get work. I was a genius chef that was just too difficult to work with, and it was about me and my new wife. That was the first wife. Struggling to, open a restaurant or something. And then the Fox deal, a few years after that deal, I was invited to Montreal to be on the Remember This Guy showcase. And I pitched a show that was a good idea. I pitched a show about a guy who had won the Oscar for best short film. Mm-hmm. And the backstory was he had all these opportunities, but he just blew it all with drugs and alcohol and got spit out by show business before it even started. He ended up back in his hometown of Tucson being a wedding video guy. So he was an Oscar award-winning wedding videographer, and that was the world. And then, but there was also one in between, right? The NBC deal, the original one got extended to, I was strip mall lawyer, a pro bono kind of strip mall lawyer. And then there was then a script deal with HBO where I was an advertising executive who had a manic episode. The backstory on that was like I danced naked in a fountain in front of the building, and then decided I was done with advertising and I was going to just sort of kind of change the world.
That was like your enlightened pitch almost, right?
Yeah. Right, in small increments. So I had this large list of things that I had to do to change the world, and I was in, that we wrote a script. I wrote a script with Jerry Stahl. That was a pretty good script, and elements of that dynamic, kind of appeared in the series this time when the recovery episode and the sponsor episode, But the IFC thing happened because, I was doing this podcast and I took a general meeting with Jim Serpico at Apostle, who liked the podcast.
I mean, it's just, I'm probably the 8,000th person to point this out to you, but the one that took is the one about your life.
Right. The other ones were just, sort of putting the character of me,
yeah,
into situations where I thought it could work.
Did you feel like your own life wasn't compelling enough for a show?
No, but I think that was just the nature of what comics did at that time, is that, you had a point of view. So now build a world around it. It was there weren't very many comics being comics on television. I mean, Seinfeld sort of changed that, and then Larry David, and I think that there are precedents for it, like the Dick Van Dyke Show to a certain degree, but it wasn't until recently that I think the culture sort of acknowledged that, comedian was a job that people had.
And you also wonder, like, how many shows about comedians being comedians do there need to be at any one time,
that's right? That's right. And so, Seinfeld does it, and then, Larry does it, and then Louis does it. And then, so my angle was really, well, yeah, I'm a comic, but, the real thing that I'm doing that's interesting in the sense of something that's new and that was really unpitchable 10 years ago was, I'm having celebrities come to my garage to talk to me. And I think if I would have pitched that 10 years ago, just as a fictional concept, they would have been like, that's ridiculous.
It's also like, hey, here's a great excuse to get a name or a semi-name in every episode, right?
Well, that's the reality of the thing. I think that once, when I went into Serpico and, he said, what can we do with this? I said, well, how about we do a show about a guy who does a podcast out of his garage after everything is crapped out on him. And he talks to celebrities. And he was like, that seems like a valid idea, And I'm like, all right, well, so he got some money together from Fox Studios, and we shot a presentation. And, and it worked. I mean, the idea was, we can integrate celebrities into it in the same way that like Larry Sanders did or something like that. But I mean, that's really the nature of my life. And then we took that presentation around, and IFC loved it, and they were like, let's make this show. And then we made 10 of them, and they look pretty good.
So you're engaged now?
I just got engaged again.
Yeah,
I'm a fucking moron. I mean, I'm very excited. What did I say?
We'll edit that out. She must know from early on, based on how much you do that's confessional, that some of this stuff is. Do you have to go into it with like a deal that there are certain things that I'm not gonna air in public?
Yeah, usually it's after I do it once, and then that becomes a problem. It can get dicey, but that's always been the case. As a comic who does stuff about their life. That happens. Those are discussions that have to happen.
Yeah.
Within the show, I mean, there have been bits I've done on stage where she's like, I don't want you to do that. And I'm like, but it's my life. And she would say like, yeah, but it's your point of view of your life. And, you're characterizing me in a way and I have to go like, well, I don't know. Okay. It really comes down to a choice of like, do you want to, do your act or keep the girl, right? But there's ways to navigate that. Like the show is fictionalized. It's not a reality show. There are things in the IFC show that are based on my life, but it's also based on events in my life that happened, 3 years ago. It takes some finessing, but ultimately it is a scripted show. The stand-up's a little more tricky because, that's first person. And the book, when I wrote the book, there was a chapter in there that she was like, you can't put that in there. I just don't, I'm not a public person. And, I just don't think, I think it's stilted. And I fought it and, I rewrote it and she was still like, no. And I'm like, all right, I'll take it out. And I wrote something else that was actually better. So, that's how selfish men learn how to be better people, is by having a woman kick your ass.
Has the show made you a better person, a more level person, and like an easier person to get along with?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, I don't know if it was the show.
I think it was the podcast and working through issues on.
But I think more so what it was I've not done what I do creatively in terms of my voice, differently, in the sense that like I've always been trying to be myself. I've been more aggravated at different points, and I've focused on different things, but it was always an evolution of self. There was never any sort of like, well, I'm going to do this character now, or I'm going to do more of this now. It was always sort of like a sort of journey of self creatively. And I think what the podcast ultimately did for me was, by the time I'd done the podcast, I'd really let go. I mean, genuinely, surrendered any idea that, I would be, one, an important comic, and two, have any real television opportunity. At that point, I was like, I just have to figure out something to do to survive. And, the thought of being just a sort of kind of, unknown headliner, out there on the road for the rest of my life was, that was like like purgatory or being dead to me. I didn't see how I could manage that life.
I mean, what is being known mean to you? Because you've always been able to tour, and there've always
That's
been
not
people.
true.
No, okay.
Yeah, because really, what anyone thinks is relevant, which is like, okay, I've been on a lot of Conan O'Brien's or whatever, but how you pick up traction culturally, who knows what that is? The fact of the matter is that, I'm a capable comic. I'm an original comic. I've been respected by comics, and some people know me, but I didn't have much cultural traction because when it comes down to sort of boots on the ground, making money and having opportunities, you've got to sell tickets. So it doesn't matter, how much you've been on television or what. I mean, if you can't sell tickets, then, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I can get road work. So what I mean by unknown is really just that, do I have a fan base? And I didn't.
Yeah.
So I think what the podcast has done more than anything else is that, despite money or anything else, I feel like because of how people respond to it and what it seems to be doing for people and what they're getting out of it, I feel like I've done something relevant. So I think for the first time in my life, what I have that I didn't have is some genuine self-esteem around what I dedicated my life to.
I guess the question that is, like, did you have a very specific idea of once I hit this, then I will be successful? I mean, obviously, as you go along, that changes.
Look, dude, after you hit a certain age. I mean, I'm almost 50, so whatever you think you wanted when you were a kid, it really changes into
Sure.
I'd like to not die broke and have insurance.
Well, yeah, and doing and like doing if somebody told you you'd be doing a successful podcast 5 years ago, I mean, what does that even mean, right?
No, I don't know what any of that means. I'm not that. I don't have that much foresight. I'm not that calculating. I never had a plan. I didn't have a career path. I just wanted to be a great comedian. Did I ever think that I would be, a great interviewer, or that I would be known for doing this thing that is unique and authentic, that has to do with talking to other people? No, I had no sense of that. Was it hard for me to accept that people know me for this ability over my stand-up? Originally, it was. I still have a moment where if I do a stand-up show and people come up to me and go, "I love your podcast," I'm like, "Well, what about what I just did on stage here for an hour?" But I've grown to appreciate that. Whatever it is I'm putting out there, it has to do with my honesty and my vision or my ability to engage or whatever my creativity is. So, but no, I didn't see anything happening.
I saw you do stand up in the Air America days, and I've seen you do the podcast live, but I haven't actually seen you do stand up since you started doing the show. And I'm wondering,
there's going to be a special on Netflix probably in July, maybe August.
How has it changed? I mean, obviously, I assume you're not paying as close of attention to the news as
when I started the podcast, I was very specific in terms of I didn't want to be involved in the political dialogue anymore. Yeah. I can do it and I can apply myself to it, but it wasn't really my passion. And I felt that, dealing with more existential issues was more important, and getting to the roots of my own, anger and my own sort of observations about things. I'm getting a little tired of myself. I have thoughts recently that, maybe I should re-engage with something outside of my, immediate situation. And I think I will. But it was a very that I was calculating in that as much as I enjoyed doing talk radio and doing politics, it's extremely divisive, and I thought that I had more to offer.
Are you do you feel better? Are you healthier now that you're not following politics all the time?
Well, I just think that it's very hard not to be used by that process. Is that it's very hard to find your own voice. Depending on what side you're servicing, there's very few original political thinkers, and when you're reacting to that cycle, the legislative cycle or the political cycle or the news cycle, you are in some ways. Not only, I wouldn't say it's parasitical, but, you will end up servicing an ideology, and you will not have a lot of original thought. You will have reactions that will, be rooted in the ideological side that you take. So, you can get a lot of anger, and you can have moments of righteousness, even if you don't feel them, just by having an ideological bent on something. So I was looking for something more authentic. Also, I think that the TV show, one thing that we did was, one thing that was important to me was to create, that, to have that authenticity, over, sort of writing jokes or being insanely concerned, with the comedy. We sort of let, what I do breathe on there. And IFC was supportive enough to sort of, let us do that. So I think what you have because of that is, some fairly unique television. So, that was the biggest surprise, was to have that opportunity, because I thought that was way out of the car, that was off the table. And then to do it with, a certain amount of autonomy and sort of, commitment to what I've already been building was a great thing.
All right, there you have it. That was Marc Maron. Thanks so much to Marc for taking the time. Thanks to IFC for setting up that interview. Want to apologize after the fact for the relative brevity of that episode. Marc's a busy guy. He was in town promoting the final episode of the first season of Maron that debuted last week on IFC. Had just finished up a book tour. Was, I believe, trapped in Buffalo, New York for an extended period of time, and had just done Letterman for the first time the day before. So, of course, preparing himself for the big time, like podcasts on their 8th episode. But all things considered, I think that went pretty well. Marc was in fairly good spirits for that one, in spite of being fairly busy, and in spite of the fact that it's been disgusting here in New York City. So Marc thankfully got to go back to that beautiful 120-degree weather in Los Angeles, California. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please rate us on iTunes. You can follow us on Tumblr. It's riylcast.tumblr.com. Notes on things. You can send those notes on things to us. That's also riylcast, but that one's at gmail.com. Got a couple more episodes in the can already, so stay tuned. We've got interviews coming up with cartoonist Julia Wirtz will be on the show. We spoke to Douglas Rushkoff, the media theorist. We spoke to Ellen Forney, another cartoonist. So yeah, lots more show to come. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.